He was a billionaire's only son. At just 10 years old, he received a devastating diagnosis, a rare and aggressive disease. The doctors were clear, there was nothing more they could do. 3 months to live, no treatment worked, no hope remained. His father, a powerful man in possession of an incalculable fortune, tried everything money could buy. But in the end, it wasn't a doctor or a scientist who stepped in. It was the family's cleaning lady. What this humble woman did in secret, without asking permission and expecting nothing in return, brought the father to tears. She risked everything to give love to a child who wasn't even her own flesh and blood. And when the world found out, everything changed. This is the true story of how love, when it is real, doesn't need DNA. It only needs courage. And how sometimes the greatest miracles come from the most unexpected hearts. Before we continue with this emotional story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment below telling us which city you're watching from. We love to know how far our stories travel. The sound of the clock on the wall echoed inside the hospital room, each tick like a heavy hammer blow. The doctor faced the millionaire couple with professional coolness, but his words cut like knives. The boy has only 3 months to live. The sentence was delivered, and in that instant, the boy's childhood was stolen. The father lowered his eyes, the mother crossed her arms, and the silence weighed even more heavily than the news. In the bed, the 10-year-old boy didn't fully comprehend the gravity of the situation. He looked into his parents' eyes, searching for comfort, but found nothing but restrained despair. The boy frowned, sensing that something bigger was happening, something that would change everything. He asked softly, "I'm going to be okay, right?" But no one answered. Only the dry sound of the doctor's breath cut through the air. The father, a businessman accustomed to solving everything with money, immediately asked about treatments. "How much does it cost? What can we do?" The doctor shook his head, explaining that there was no price for buying time when the disease was so advanced. The answer was like a punch to the millionaire's ego. For the first time, his power meant nothing. The boy shrank into the white sheets, observing his parents' harsh expressions. There were no tears, no embrace, no warmth. He felt invisible in his own pain. His childish heart didn't understand the word terminal, but it recognized the weight of loneliness. The absence of affection hurt more than the illness itself. When the family returned home, the boy carried a suffocating silence within him. In the luxury car, no one said a word. The mother stared out the window, while the father fiddled with his phone, already calling specialists around the world. The boy, sitting in the back, just hugged his favorite toy, a doll that had never come to life in any real games. Upon arriving at the mansion, the child was left in his room, as if putting away a fragile and expensive object. The space was enormous, filled with pricey toys, but they all sat still, untouched, as if they belonged to another life. The boy walked among them and realized he had never had anyone to play with. The toys seemed to mock his loneliness. Lying in bed, he remembered the doctor's words, which spun like an echo in his mind. 3 months. But what did that mean to a child who hadn't even truly lived yet? He clutched the doll to his chest and closed his eyes, trying to imagine a different world. A world where he had someone who genuinely cared. That night, the mansion was silent. The father was locked in his office, the mother in her room with loud music playing. The boy listened to every distant sound, but none were for him. The clock on his bedroom wall marked the time, and he felt that every lost second was a piece of his childhood being torn away. In silent tears, he murmured, "Who will miss me when I'm gone?" The question dissolved into the air, unanswered. But on the other side of the door, someone heard. It wasn't his parents nor the doctors, but the humble woman who cleaned the mansion's floors every day. And so, without anyone noticing, the first invisible link began to form. The pain of a child about to lose his life echoed in the heart of someone who already knew the pain of loss. Fate was about to unite two souls who should never have met, but who would change each other forever. The boy's room looked like a museum of children's luxury. Remote-controlled cars, the latest video games, collector's edition action figures, all arranged on shelves and in boxes. But nothing showed any signs of use. It was as if these toys existed only to display wealth, not to bring happiness. The boy walked among them, feeling an emptiness that not even 1,000 gifts could fill. He picked up a red toy car, turned it on, and watched the wheels spin, but there was no one to play beside him. He left the toy on the floor and sighed. The silence in the room was so heavy that even the sound of the motors seemed sad. It was a space full of everything, yet at the same time, full of nothing. In the corner, the cleaner entered discreetly, bucket and cloth in hand. She had always kept herself invisible, bowing her head before her employers and carrying out her tasks in silence. But on that day, something caught her attention. The boy's tear-filled eyes. She hesitated, paused her cleaning, and watched him. The boy, noticing her presence, quickly wiped his tears with the back of his hands. He pretended to be busy with his toys, but he couldn't hide his sad gaze. The humble woman approached slowly, unsure if she was allowed to speak. Until then, she had never exchanged more than a few words with the heir. "Are you all right, son?" she asked in a soft voice. The boy hesitated, as if he didn't know whether he could trust her. After a moment he murmured, "I have no one to play with." That simple, painful confession pierced the woman's heart like an arrow. She set down her cleaning cloth and smiled, though her own eyes were wet with tears. "What if I play with you?" The boy stared at her in surprise. No one had ever made that offer. Not his parents, not his teachers, not anyone in the house. For the first time, someone was offering companionship instead of things. The boy smiled shyly, a small but real smile. "You would do that?" he asked, almost in disbelief. The cleaner nodded and sat down on the rug beside him. Together, they began to push the cars across the floor. It was a simple scene, but for him it was like discovering a new world. As they played, the cleaner watched the boy's eyes light up. It was as if, for a few minutes, he had forgotten about the illness and the cruel deadline that hung over his life. The laugh that escaped his lips was the first to echo in that room in a very long time. But the door suddenly opened. The father appeared, his face stern as he took in the scene. Silence fell over the room. He closed the door forcefully without saying a word, but his look of disapproval was seared into the cleaner's heart. She knew she would be held accountable for her gesture. Still, in that moment, she decided it would be worth it. The boy, afraid she would leave, gripped the cleaner's hand tightly. "You'll come back tomorrow, won't you?" he asked with pleading eyes. She smiled and replied softly, "I promise." And just like that, the emptiness in that room began to be filled not with expensive toys, but with something money could never buy: true companionship. The next morning, the boy woke up with a spark of anticipation in his eyes. He got out of bed and ran to the window, hoping to see the cleaner arriving for work. His heart beat fast, as if it were a special day. For the first time in a long time, he had a reason to smile. When his bedroom door opened, there she was, with her bucket and cloth in hand. The boy couldn't contain his joy and exclaimed, "You came back!" The cleaner smiled, surprised by the warm reception. She had expected to find a frail, quiet boy, but instead she saw a small flicker of life beginning to bloom. The boy ran to the shelf and grabbed a board game. "Do you know how to play?" he asked with childish eagerness. The woman hesitated for a moment, remembering that she was there to work, not to play. But seeing his hopeful eyes, she couldn't resist. She sat beside him and replied, "Teach me." As they played, his laughter filled the room, echoing through the mansion's halls. It was a rare sound, one that no one there was used to hearing. For the cleaner, each laugh was like a blessing, bringing back memories of her own son, who had been taken from her far too soon. Between moves, the boy asked with the unfiltered innocence of a child, "Do you have kids?" The question made her heart ache. For a second, she considered lying, but she chose to be honest. "I had one. He was your age, but he's not here anymore." The boy furrowed his brow, trying to understand. "Did he die?" he asked softly. The cleaner nodded, fighting back tears. The boy then placed his small hand on hers and said, "I can be like your son, if you want." Those words pierced her soul like a beam of light in the darkness. From that day on, something shifted between them. It was no longer just an employer-employee relationship. It was a deep bond, built in the silence of shared pain. The boy found in her the mother he never truly had, and she found in him the chance to relive the love that had been torn from her. But not everyone was happy with this growing closeness. Outside the room, the father watched from a distance, growing more and more uncomfortable. To him, this was unacceptable. How could a cleaning lady occupy a space that not even he, as a father, had managed to fill? That night, the millionaire made a harsh decision. He would not let this simple woman intrude on his son's life. He believed he could control everything, even the feelings of a child on the brink of death. Little did he know that his son's heart had already chosen who would stand by his side until the very end. The next morning at breakfast, the father summoned the cleaner to the main living room. With a cold gaze and a firm voice, he said, "You are here to clean, not to play with my son. I want that to be very clear." The woman lowered her eyes, but inside, she felt the weight of the injustice. She wasn't just cleaning rooms, she was cleaning invisible wounds. Meanwhile, the boy waited anxiously in his room, holding his toys, certain she would come to play. But the hours passed, and nothing happened. The silence returned to dominate, bringing back the loneliness he so dreaded. The clock seemed to mock him, marking every lost minute. When the cleaner finally entered, the boy's eyes lit up. But before he could speak, his father appeared behind her and declared, "She will no longer be playing with you." The boy froze, looking from one to the other, not understanding. "Why?" he asked, his voice trembling. The father sighed impatiently. "Because that is not her role. You have doctors, therapists, private tutors. She is just a cleaner." The words fell like stones on the boy's heart. For the first time, he felt anger toward his own father. With tears in his eyes, the boy shouted, "But none of them make me laugh. None of them hold my hand when I'm scared." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. The father didn't know what to say. The cleaner, in shock, just stood motionless, fearing she would be fired on the spot. The boy then ran to her and grabbed her hand tightly. "I want her with me. If you take her away, I'll be all alone again." That declaration broke the humble woman's heart, as she felt in the boy's small fingers the same need her own son once had. The father clenched his fists, torn between anger and helplessness. He had never heard his son speak with such conviction. He realized for the first time that no matter how much money he had, he couldn't buy the affection the cleaner offered for free. That night, the family argued about the future. The mother suggested dismissing the woman, but the father hesitated. Something about that scene had shaken him deeply. The boy, lying in his room, couldn't sleep. He held his doll to his chest and repeated silently, "She'll come back, she promised." And deep down, the millionaire knew it too. If he sent her away, he would not only lose an employee, but the only spark of life that still remained in his son. It was a battle no amount of money could win. The next day, the cleaner returned to the room with cautious steps. Her face showed uncertainty, but also a resolve not to abandon the boy. The boy ran to her and hugged her tightly, like someone afraid of losing the only person who understood him. She returned the embrace, feeling an old pain and a new hope in her chest. Sitting on the floor, they began to talk. The boy revealed that he had never ridden a bike, never eaten cotton candy, never even visited a park. Each sentence sounded like a stolen piece of childhood. The cleaner listened in silence, tears in her eyes, recognizing the absence of a life that should have been lived. "Then we'll do all of it together," she said with conviction. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief. "You would do that for me?" The woman smiled and replied, "I would do anything to see you smile." In that moment, a silent pact was sealed between them. With every wish he mentioned, she imagined how she could make it happen. Even with her limited resources, she had no money, no power, but she had something no one else offered: love. And that was enough to start. The boy took a piece of paper and began to list his life wishes. He wrote in a child's handwriting: ride a bike, fly a kite, eat cotton candy, play with a ball, go to the zoo. Simple things, but to him, they seemed like impossible dreams. When he finished writing, he handed the paper to the cleaner as if it were a treasure. "This is my wish list. Do you promise you'll help me with it?" She held the paper carefully and answered, "I promise. We'll do every single one, even if it's on your last day." That night, the boy slept with a smile on his face. It was the first time since the diagnosis that he closed his eyes, believing he still had something to look forward to the next day. Outside, the father watched from a distance, unseen. His heart, hardened by years of business and money, began to stir. But instead of admitting it, he locked himself even deeper in his own silence. What the millionaire didn't realize was that while he was trying to control life with figures, a humble cleaning lady was giving his son something priceless: a childhood in 3 months. Over the weekend, the cleaner took the boy to the park. There were no limousines, no security, no luxury, just a small bicycle borrowed from a neighbor, and the anticipation on his face. The boy got on the seat, scared but also excited. His first pedal strokes were wobbly, and soon he fell to the ground. For a moment he was silent, startled, but then he started to laugh, a pure, loud laugh that filled the cleaner's heart with joy. "I did it! I rode a bike!" he shouted even as he was falling. She ran to help him up, but he insisted, "No, let me try again." With each new attempt, his laughter grew. People in the park began to watch, never imagining that this boy, surrounded by so much luxury at home, was having his first true childhood experience. After the bike ride, she bought him cotton candy with the few coins she had in her pocket. The boy took his first bite, and his eyes widened. "It's sweet like a cloud," he said, laughing with his mouth sticky with sugar. For the cleaner, that moment was worth more than any treasure. As they played, he looked at her and said, "You're the best friend I've ever had." The sentence pierced her heart with both tenderness and pain. She remembered her lost son, but also felt that somehow he was living on through this boy. On the way back, exhausted, the boy fell asleep in her arms. The cleaner carried him carefully, feeling the light weight of a fragile body, but also the immense weight of the responsibility she had taken on. When they arrived at the mansion, the father saw them from the window. He watched his son smiling in his sleep, something he hadn't seen in years. But instead of feeling gratitude, his heart was filled with jealousy. How could this simple woman give the boy what he, with all his fortune, could not? That night, the millionaire drank silently in his office, stewing in his discomfort. He didn't know it yet, but that unlikely bond was about to change not only his son's life, but his own as well. The boy, for his part, slept clutching the paper with his wish list. Every laugh he had that day was a reminder that, even with so little time, he could still just be a child. And that was all he needed. The next morning, the boy woke up full of energy, despite the illness that was slowly consuming his strength. He grabbed his wish list and ran to the cleaner, asking, "What's next?" She smiled, but inside she felt the weight of time running out. Every day could be the last. As they planned their next outing, the boy asked an unexpected question. "You always look sad when I talk about dying. Why?" The cleaner hesitated, swallowed hard, and looked away. He insisted, "Did you lose someone too?" She took a deep breath and with restrained tears revealed her secret. "I had a son, exactly your age. He got sick too, and I couldn't save him." The boy fell silent, looking at her intently. For the first time, he realized that this woman understood his pain better than anyone else. The silence was broken when he took her hand and said, "Then I can be your son now, and you can be my mom." The cleaner wept silently, holding him tight. It was as if life had given them both a second chance, however brief. From that moment on, their bond grew even deeper. It was no longer just companionship, it was true love, built on shared pain. For the cleaner, every one of the boy's smiles was like seeing her own son alive again. For the boy, every hug was the comfort he had never received from his parents. But this bond began to attract more and more attention within the mansion. The other staff members whispered, and the father watched with growing suspicion. To him, it was an affront. He couldn't understand how a simple woman could occupy the space that had always belonged to him as a father. That night, the cleaner prayed alone in her room. She asked for the strength to continue, but she feared being sent away at any moment. The boy upstairs was secretly writing a note. "Thank you for being my mum. I love you." Little did he know that those words would have the power to change destinies. And so, as the illness progressed, a new kind of love blossomed. Unlikely, unexpected, and unbreakable. But the world around them would not allow this connection to continue without a fight. Time was against them, and so was the family. One morning, the father summoned the cleaner to his office. The room smelled of polished wood and expensive whiskey. In a firm voice, he said, "This is over. You will not go near my son again." The woman froze, feeling the ground give way beneath her. He continued, "You are confusing things. He is my son, not yours." Meanwhile, in his room, the boy waited anxiously for her arrival. With his toys spread out on the rug, he glanced at the door every minute. But the hours passed, and she didn't appear. Anxiety turned to sadness, and sadness turned to tears. When she was finally able to enter, the cleaner was met with a desperate hug. "Where were you? I thought you had abandoned me." She couldn't answer, only held him close. But before she could explain, the father stormed in, furious. "I told you to stay away from him," the millionaire shouted. The boy's eyes widened, and for the first time he stood up to his father. "I don't want you, I want her." The words cut through the man's heart like sharp knives. He never imagined he would hear that from his own son. The silence that followed was unbearable. The cleaner, trembling, tried to explain, "I only want to give him what you never have. Love." The father clenched his fists, overcome by wounded pride. "Love cannot be bought or sold, and you have no right to take my place." The boy, crying, shouted, "But you never hugged me. You never played with me. You were never here when I needed you." Each word was like a punch to his soul. The millionaire, speechless, just stormed out, slamming the door behind him. In that moment, the cleaner realized she was risking not just her job, but her simple life. Still, she knew she couldn't abandon the boy. He was more than a rich, sick child. He was, in a way, her own son reborn. That night, the boy wrote another note and hid it under his pillow. "If you don't stay with me, I'll die alone." These words would be his silent weapon against his family's indifference. And so, the war within the mansion was declared. On one side, the pride of a millionaire father. On the other, the true love of a humble woman. And in the middle, a boy with only 3 months to learn what it truly meant to live. The following days were marked by a heavy silence within the mansion. The father avoided looking at his son, burying himself in meetings and business as if he could escape reality. The mother took refuge in parties and social engagements, unable to cope with the pain. And in the midst of it all, the boy grew weaker each day. His body no longer had the same strength. The outings became shorter, and he had to stop frequently to rest. But he always held the cleaner's hand and said, "It's not over yet. I want to live until the very last second." These words were like a fire in her heart, giving her the strength to carry on. The wish list, once a promise, now felt like a race against time. Every check mark on the paper was a victory, but also a cruel reminder that the end was near. There were only a few wishes left, and she knew she wouldn't have many more days to fulfill them. One afternoon, while he was resting, the boy asked her to read him a story. Not a fairy tale, but her own story. "I want to know what you would do if you were me," he said in a weak voice. The cleaner, moved, told him how she would give anything to trade places with him. The boy listened in silence, then replied, "You're already doing it. You're living every moment with me that I never had. You're giving me what money can't buy." The woman cried, but she also smiled, realizing that even in his fragility, he possessed a wisdom greater than that of many adults. That night, the illness took a brutal turn. The boy developed a high fever and a constant cough, forcing the doctors to stay by his side. The father, for the first time, entered the room and saw him in agony. But instead of holding him, he stood frozen at the door, unable to get closer. The cleaner, on the other hand, held his hand and whispered words of comfort. The boy looked at her and said, "Promise you'll be with me until the end." She answered firmly, "I promise. Not even death will keep me from you." Outside, the doctors shook their heads, knowing there was little left to be done. But inside the room, there was a love so strong it defied the illness itself. It was as if her mere presence could give the boy a few more days of life. And as dawn broke over the mansion, the race against time intensified. The clock wouldn't stop, but neither would love. The question that echoed was, would there still be time to fulfill his greatest wish? The next morning, the boy woke up with his eyes shining, despite his weakness. He called the cleaner over and whispered, "I want to have a birthday party, even if I don't make it to 11. The sentence made her heart tremble, but it also filled her eyes with determination. The woman knew the family would never support the idea. The father would consider it a waste of time, and the mother would find it unnecessary. But she couldn't deny his last request. If this was to be his final memory, it should be one of joy, not pain. With the few possessions she had, she began to plan. She sold her wedding ring, some clothes, and even a small television. Each item sold was like a piece of herself, given in sacrifice. But she didn't care. Anything to give him one day of happiness. Meanwhile, the boy wrote colorful invitations with crayons. He invited the few friends he never had a chance to make. Neighbors he barely knew, nurses, and even other staff members from the house. "I want everyone to come, even the ones who never played with me," he said with enthusiasm. With every detail, the cleaner felt her time shortening. She prepared balloons, a cake, and simple decorations, all filled with love. The boy helped as much as he could, painting pictures that would be used as decorations. It was a party made not of luxury, but of genuine love. When his father found out, he reacted coldly. "This is ridiculous. He doesn't need this." But the boy looked at him with surprising courage and replied, "I don't want expensive toys. I just want a party with the people who love me." The millionaire was left speechless. His mother tried to dissuade him, saying it would be too painful, but the boy insisted, "I want to laugh before I die." That broke down any resistance. For the first time, the family realized they couldn't deny a child's final wish. The cleaner worked tirelessly, despite her own exhaustion and fragile health. With each preparation, she remembered her own son and imagined how happy he would have been at a party like this. It was as if she were organizing a celebration for both of them at the same time. The night before the party, the boy couldn't sleep from excitement. He held her hand and repeated, "It's going to be the best day of my life." The cleaner smiled, but in her heart, she knew it could also be the last. And so, between tears and hope, the once cold mansion prepared to host something it had never had, a true celebration of love. The day of the party arrived. The mansion, once cold and silent, was decorated with colorful balloons and drawings made by the boy himself. There was no luxury, but there was life. The cleaner, though exhausted, rushed around, ensuring every detail reflected love. The cake was simple, bought with the last few coins she had, yet when the boy saw it, his eyes shone as if it were the grandest feast in the world. "It's the most beautiful cake I've ever seen," he exclaimed with joy, hugging her tightly. The guests began to arrive, a few neighbors, nurses, household staff. They all brought small gifts, nothing expensive, but full of meaning. The boy, accustomed to lavish gifts without affection, cried upon receiving a simple plastic car from a gardener. The party was filled with laughter and games. The boy ran, though with difficulty, sang, though with a weak voice, and danced, though with a frail body. For a few hours, he forgot that death was waiting for him. He lived intensely, as every child should. In a corner, the father watched in silence, unable to comprehend how this humble woman had managed to turn a farewell into a celebration. For the first time, his eyes welled up, but pride still kept him from admitting it. During the party, the boy blew out the candles and made a wish. "I want everyone to remember me smiling, not crying." The sentence left everyone in tears. The cleaner, however, smiled, hiding the pain in her chest. But the truth was harsh. To grant that final wish, she had sacrificed everything. She had sold her belongings and even put off a treatment she needed for her own health. She was consuming herself from the inside out, but nothing mattered in the face of the boy's happiness. As she hugged the boy, she thought of her lost son. It was as if she was celebrating his birthday too. Two boys united by fate, two stories intertwined in a single celebration. In that moment, she realized she hadn't just thrown a party. She had given him something greater, the chance to be a child truly, for the first time. But as everyone laughed, time revealed its cruelty. The boy's body was beginning to fail, and the party that was supposed to last for hours was about to be cut short by the inevitable. The music was still playing when the boy began to cough violently. At first, everyone thought it was just a passing fit, but the cough turned into a struggle for air. The cleaner ran to him, holding him in her arms, as the guests fell silent in panic. The boy tried to smile, but his face was pale and sweaty. "I'm tired," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The cleaner gripped his hand tightly and replied, "Don't leave me now, please. Just stay a little longer." The doctors were called urgently, but inside the mansion, it felt as if time had stopped. The father ran into the room, seeing his son collapsing in the cleaner's arms. For the first time, he dropped to his knees before the scene. The boy closed his eyes, and everyone believed it was the end. A heavy silence spread through the room like a shadow. The cake still sat on the table, its candles burning alone, and the balloons swayed like silent witnesses to the tragedy. The cleaner cried desperately, rocking the fragile body in her arms. "Don't go now, please. You haven't finished your wish list yet," she shouted through her tears. The father, sobbing, didn't know how to react. The silence was broken by a faint whisper. "I'm not done yet." The boy slowly opened his eyes, clutching her arm. It was as if he had returned just to deliver one last message. The cleaner hugged him with all her might, crying and laughing at the same time. I'm here. I promised I wouldn't leave you alone. He smiled faintly, even through his coughs, and replied, I knew you would. The father watched, completely defeated. He realized for the first time that the love he had tried to buy his whole life was right there, in front of him, coming from the person he valued the least. The boy rested his head on the cleaner's shoulder, breathing with difficulty. The room, once full of celebration, was now the stage for a somber and moving moment. Everyone knew the end was near, but no one wanted to accept it. And so, the night that began with smiles ended in silence, suspense, and tears. The question that echoed was, would he have the strength to say goodbye, or would that be his last breath? The night wore on, and the room was silent, lit only by the faint glow of a lamp. The boy lay in bed, his breathing labored. The cleaner remained by his side, holding his hand, never letting go for a single moment. The father stood in the doorway, watching with tear-filled eyes, unable to approach. The boy opened his eyes with effort and whispered, I'm afraid to fall asleep and not wake up. The cleaner stroked his hair and said, I'll be here when you wake up, and if you don't, I'll still be here. Her words were like a protective blanket over him. In a weak voice, the boy asked, Tell me a story, but not about kings and castles. Tell me ours. The woman smiled through her tears and began to narrate every wish fulfilled, every moment they had lived together. As he listened, the boy closed his eyes, as if reliving it all one more time. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked at his father, who remained motionless. Dad, he murmured with effort. The millionaire approached, kneeling beside the bed. Yes, my son? The boy smiled faintly and said, I forgive you, but I want you to learn to love the way she loved me. The man's tears fell onto the sheets. It was the first time his son had ever seen him cry. The cleaner held both their hands, uniting them in that final moment. The silence was broken only by the child's fragile breathing. With his last bit of strength, the boy turned to the cleaner. Now I know what it feels like to be loved. Thank you for giving me that before the end. The woman's heart nearly broke into pieces. She hugged him tenderly, as if trying to hold him to the world for one more instant. Then, with a soft breath, he was gone. His body relaxed, and silence filled the room. The cleaner wept quietly, while the father collapsed in desperate sobs. In that moment, they all understood. The boy had passed, but he had left behind an eternal lesson. Grief filled the space, but alongside it was a strange sense of peace. He did not go alone. He did not depart in the coldness of abandonment. He departed in the arms of the one who had truly given him love. And so, a chapter closed, not just in the boy's life, but also in the heart of a family that would never be the same again. The father remained kneeling beside the bed, unable to let go of his son's hand. He cried as he had never cried in his entire life. For the first time, the millionaire felt powerless, small, broken. No amount of money, no power, no connections could bring back what he had lost. The cleaner, her eyes still swollen from crying, slowly stood up. She looked at the man with compassion, despite everything. He died knowing he was loved. That's more than many people have. Her words were simple, but they cut deep into his heart. The millionaire got to his feet, staggering, and faced the woman. I failed as a father, and you gave him what I never knew how to give. His trembling voice betrayed his pain and shame. For the first time, his pride had been shattered. She replied softly, There is still time to change, to not repeat the same mistake. The man in tears could only nod. The void left by his son would be eternal, but perhaps it could become a turning point. At the funeral, everyone spoke of the fortune the boy would have inherited, but the father didn't listen. His son's words echoed in his mind. I want you to learn to love the way she loved me. The sentence had become his verdict, his mission. With every glance at the cleaner, the millionaire felt more ashamed. He had scorned this woman, yet she had been his son's true family. Now, standing before the small casket, he understood that greatness was not found in money, but in the love he never knew how to offer. In an unexpected gesture, he approached the cleaner in front of everyone and fell to his knees. "Thank you for giving my son what I could not." Tears streamed down his face uncontrollably, and everyone in the room was moved. She gently helped him up and said, "You don't have to thank me. He just wanted to be loved, and that cost nothing." The sentence resonated like an absolute truth, echoing in the hearts of those present. That night, alone in his office, the millionaire looked at old photos of his son. In all of them, there were expensive gifts and luxurious trips, but never genuine smiles. For the first time, he realized he had lost not only his son, but the chance to be a real father. And so, the tears he had never shed fell freely. They were late, but they were necessary. The man who once believed he owned the world now discovered he owned nothing, not even his son's love. Months passed since the farewell. The mansion, once a stage of cold silence, now carried an absence that was impossible to fill. Every corner seemed to scream the boy's name. Every dusty toy was a reminder of what had not been lived. But in the cleaner's heart, there was something beyond the pain. There was a mission. With what little she had, she transformed her grief into strength. She rented a small, simple house and began taking in sick and needy children. There was no luxury, but there was human warmth. She named the place the Smile Shelter, in honor of the smile the boy had fought so hard to have in his final days. Gradually, other people began to join her: volunteer nurses, supportive neighbors, even some of the staff from the old mansion. The shelter grew, and the story of the 10-year-old boy began to touch more and more lives. He was gone, but his short existence had become a flame that illuminated other destinies. The millionaire, transformed by his loss, started visiting the shelter regularly, not as a rich man displaying his power, but as someone seeking redemption. He donated resources, but above all, he tried to give what he hadn't known how to give before: his time and affection. One afternoon, while helping to organize toys, the millionaire found the cleaner smiling at a frail child. "You've managed to keep his spirit alive," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She simply replied, "He taught me that every minute matters. Now we can't waste a single one." One day, late in the afternoon, a new child arrived at the shelter. She was thin, with curious and shy eyes. She approached the cleaner and asked, "Can you play with me?" The question made her heart tremble. For a moment, she saw the same look in her eyes as the boy who was gone. She knelt, opened her arms, and answered tenderly, "Of course I can. That's why I'm here." The child smiled and ran into her embrace, filling the shelter with a warmth that not even grief could extinguish. In that moment, the cleaner realized that the cycle would never end. Every child who arrived was a chance to honor the boy's memory. He had left too soon, but he had left an eternal legacy, teaching that the true value of life is not in money, but in the love we give and receive. And so, between laughter and tears, the story of an heir who died young was transformed into hope for many. He was no longer there in body, but his spirit lived on in every hug, in every smile, and in every child who found a little love at the shelter. In the end, life revealed its greatest truth. Riches disappear, fortunes change hands, but a simple act of love can echo forever. And the 10-year-old boy, despite having lived so little, became eternal through those who would never forget his story.